Today I'm talking to Sebastien Couture, who is a good friend of mine and most known for being a co-founder and co-host of one of the longest running podcasts in crypto and Bitcoin and just Web3 space called Epicenter podcast. These days, he's focused on his Interop ventures and Nebular Builders, which is VC and a conference focused on Cosmos ecosystem and interchain builders. We'll talk about what it's like to work in crypto for over 10 years, how his career evolved, why he decided to stick with podcasting for so long, what are some opportunities in Cosmos ecosystem, how it is different from other ecosystems, from Ethereum, for example, and many more other questions. Stay tuned. Make sure to think of questions that you would like to ask Seb and write them down below in the comments. We'll try to answer them all. Okay, let's go. Seb Couture. I always keep butchering your last name. What's the proper name to pronounce it?
Couture works if you're saying it in English, but if you're saying it in French, it's couture. You have to be able to do this French flat R.
It's like Cartier, but more expensive. Couture. All right, cool. So I don't think I'll be able to do a full introduction of Seb because he's got too many achievements in his life, more than I can remember. But briefly, in short, that I can remember, not remember, or like highlight. He's been in crypto definitely longer than I have. He's a co-founder of Epicenter podcast. So I think he's been stacking sats for more than how many years I've been in the market. He's also currently running Nebular Summit, Nebular Builders, which is Cosmos-focused summit conference, and I believe a VC studio as well. Anyway, this is like my butchered introduction, but I'll let Seb kind of do an intro about himself.
Yeah, you kind of summed it up pretty well. So I've been doing Epicenter for the last, it's going to be 10 years in December. Epicenter is a crypto podcast that focuses on the technologies, but also the overall trends of the space. We started that podcast 10 years ago and
have been around ever since. And continue to host Epicenter with my co-hosts, Brian Crane, Sunny Agarwal, Friederike Ernst, and Meher Roy, and sometimes Felix from Course One also joins. So yeah, we're a good group of hosts there doing that podcast. And then more recently, I started a venture fund called Interop Ventures. We're an early stage fund focusing on the emerging interchain ecosystem, and we focus primarily on teams and projects building on the Cosmos technology stack, which we can talk about today here. And as part of that, I always go back to the things that I think I've been really good at over the last years is doing podcasts and hosting events. And so last year, about a year and a half ago, I founded a new podcast called the Interop, which is a podcast that focuses on, specifically on the Cosmos stack and a lot of stuff happening in the modular space and the app chain space. And then we, as you mentioned, we host Nebular Summit, which is our interchain builders conference, and that's in Paris in just over 10 days, right after CC. It's on the 24th and 25th of July. And for those interested, all the links are in my Twitter bio, so you can find links to all those things there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the intro. Definitely a challenge for me today. Interview the interviewer. You kind of interviewed everyone. Like I believe you interviewed Vitalik, all the guys from all big L1s. Cool. So 10 years, is it like 2013? Starting 2013?
Yeah, like late 2013. I started looking into Bitcoin at the time and figuring out basically how can I make money with this thing, which I think I say that a lot of times when we do the podcast, we'll ask people, how did you get into crypto? How did you get into blockchain? And I find it's interesting that people always say that they got into crypto because they were interested in the technology and that it really spoke to them and the white paper and the ideas and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people, probably came into it first thinking, how can I make money with this? And then later, the ideology and the values and the tech kind of caught on later. But I'm just open about it. I wanted to make money with crypto and didn't for a long time. Kind of failed at that for a long time. But yeah, definitely got into the values and the tech and also the ecosystem. Just great people that work in this space, and so that's what's kept me going all these years.
Do you remember which channel you discovered Bitcoin for the first time? Was it Reddit? Was it somewhere else? Was it?
No, I don't remember. I'm a big podcast listener, so I started listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. For those who remember, Adam B. Levine, who's now at CoinDesk, but Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast with Andreas Antonopoulos at the time, and actually they kind of incubated Epicenter in a way. They were we were on their network for a while, and definitely help us get off the ground in the beginning. And Epicenter's had its phases for sure. There was the beginning where it used to be called Epicenter Bitcoin, and we focused primarily on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin and a couple of altcoins, because that's all there were back in the day. I think our first episode was on like Kanye coin, which was some weird thing that got shut down. But anyway, yeah, and then very quickly, like we heard about Ethereum white paper, and we had Vitalik on, I think on like episode 58, and then we saw that the space was expanding and growing, and beyond just Bitcoin. And so at some point we decided to like drop Bitcoin from the name, and we still. It's not that we, didn't want to talk about Bitcoin anymore. We did quite a bit of Bitcoin coverage and Bitcoin content over the years. We had a lot of like the Bitcoin core devs on back in the early days, like Greg Maxwell and Adam Back and Andreas and then also Amin Gunsier when he was doing like his whole Bitcoin NG stuff. So like we did talk about Bitcoin quite a bit. My co-founder Brian did a whole thing about like selfish mining, and so yeah, we kind of like followed the ecosystem through its phases as well. Where in 2016, 2017, like when the whole world was going enterprise blockchain, we did a lot of covers around that, and now I think the content on Epicenter is also very apropos to how things are evolving. We're doing a lot of content about like modular blockchains and droppability, and certainly like bringing in a lot of other ecosystems. So yeah, it's been a crazy ride.
Was the Epicenter your first podcast, and how do you even decide to make a podcast?
Yeah, I had like wanted to start a podcast earlier, and I did like 2 episodes of some like web marketing podcast, and God knows when in the aughts. Which didn't really go anywhere. But yeah, Epicenter was definitely like first and main podcast where I really learned how to do it, and that it's definitely the thing I've done. Like beyond brushing my teeth, it's the thing I think I've done most consistently in my life is Epicenter.
The context why I'm asking this question is that obviously a lot of people listening and thinking about how can they, kickstart their career in crypto in Web3, and this is pretty much the context of this question. Maybe we'll dive in a bit deeper into it.
Yeah, I mean, creating content is a great way to do it. I think like a lot of people get into crypto and they're like, hey, I'm going to start creating content, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But my co-founder at Interop, is Clément. He got into crypto also and started creating content, and has a community of French builders. And I've met so many people also that started their crypto career. Maybe now they're doing something else, or they have some other role, or they started some other company, but they started by with some newsletter, or they were doing Twitter Spaces, or they were doing a podcast or some videos on YouTube or whatever. It's like it's so easy to utilize to learn in public. I think. I mean, if you can kind of get over the looking like an idiot or not being perfectly accurate every time, like I think like creating content for yourself and others is a great way to learn in this space.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. A lot of people that ask me questions about how do I get started in crypto, like they all ask for solutions, and it's a permissionless space. Just start building, just start kind of creating content, whether it's Twitter threads, whether it's blog posts, whether it's podcasts. Of course, you're gonna get a lot of no's initially, but you need to keep going. Yeah, I think like to kind of segue, it's interesting. Another thing that I thought about while you were saying about pretty much your progression of the kind of career is that it's interesting how the whole space, kind of the keywords and narratives changed quite a lot. First, it was Bitcoin. Then, like some people, there was this tension like Bitcoin, not blockchain, blockchain, not Bitcoin. And then kind of Ethereum came out, and then it's all about, I guess, not EVM, but like multi-purpose blockchains, I suppose, right? I guess that was the narrative, but it's, I think, on a high level, it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, ICO, World Computer, ICOs. Then crypto was a keyword at some point. Now it's Web3, maybe interoperability at some point. And I think like, what are you focused on right now is Cosmos, which is, I found personally very fascinating that you decided to pick Cosmos specifically and not something else, and not maybe double down on Bitcoin. Why Cosmos?
I mean, I didn't pick it. Like, it's
it shows me
a lot. It shows me. No, like a lot of people, I think, associate me and what we're doing with Cosmos, and I understand why that's the case. But I'm really interested in crypto growing as a whole. Like, I'm happy if Bitcoin adoption grows. I'm happy if more applications are built on Ethereum. I recognize that there are different domains and different ecosystems in the industry, but I sort of see the whole industry as one big thing that's trying to achieve the same goal. And I find it's kind of unfortunate that sometimes even within our own industry, there's like these kind of petty ideological battles or whatever. Like, we're all like here to basically decentralize the web, have more autonomy and sovereignty over our assets and our money. And that's the goal and that's the vision. And I think that we should all sort of like be, looking towards that vision and not kind of fighting against each other in the space. But most people don't do that. Like most people, I think, are open and like share that concept. Yeah, I mean, in terms of Cosmos, like I always, since I first heard about Cosmos and since we had like first interviewed Ethan Buckman and Jake Wan on the podcast in like 2016 or something like that, I thought that the vision of interoperable blockchains and really made sense. I saw a lot of overlap with the way that the web worked and the way that we build applications on the web. If you look back to the early days of the web, like the late 90s, when you wanted to build a website, you like buy some hosting at some hosting provider, and that hosting would be on like a machine that was sharing its resources with tons of other websites. And like I remember early in my career, I was working in web technology. I was like working at some e-commerce site, and like at some point, like another website on the same server had a peak in traffic, and our website went down, and that didn't. At that point, we're like, okay, like we need to upgrade. We need to go to some dedicated server, and we need to be able to manage our own resources and not have this happen again. And so it made sense to me that we would have application-specific blockchains, and we would have that applications would have more sovereignty and more control over their like underlying stack. And so that vision, I think, was an interesting way to scale blockchains. And it turns out a lot of other ecosystems are now coming to that same realization, or like came to it in parallel, like with whether it's Ethereum or Polygon or other ecosystems. The way to think about scalability is to modularize and to have more sovereignty over the app. And then for that, you need interoperability, like the composability assumptions that we have around, say, Ethereum, like early Ethereum, kind of fall apart. And so you need to have interoperability standards to allow state and to allow assets to move freely between all of these kind of sovereign domains of state. So that made sense to me. And so over the years, I've like followed that project, and I've followed that ecosystem. And when I decided to, start Interop, like we were focused on the interchain ecosystem. But even that, like, what we consider to be the interchain ecosystem, even that definition is evolving and is also expanding to include things that aren't typically, Cosmos, right? If you asked me 2 years ago what the interchain is, and you ask me now, I think my answer would be different, because the ecosystem has expanded to include all sorts of other ideas, all sorts of other concepts, all sorts of other technologies and projects that don't necessarily associate with Cosmos. And so that's what we focus on. I mean, we invest in infrastructure that allows decentralized applications to scale, to be interoperable, to be more user friendly. So we invest also in developer tooling. We think privacy is a really important aspect of crypto moving forward if it's to be adopted. And also custody is also like a really big, like a big challenge that we need to overcome if we want more people to adopt. So in summary, I've said a lot here, but I think the interchain, the idea of the interchain, the idea of these interoperable applications is really just like the blockchain ecosystem, right? In reality, it's applying the notion of what the internet is to decentralized, sovereign, distributed, censorship-resistant applications.
So we have a lot of people listening to us who are looking either for jobs or opportunities, or they're going to be starting their own company someday. What would you say are the top, let's say 3-5 like big problem areas, opportunities in Cosmos ecosystem that either they should be founding companies in that area, or maybe joining those companies that are building already solutions in these problem areas and opportunity areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's obviously like a lot. I just have to sort of think about what are the most important ones. I think so. Like in Ethereum, when Ethereum came about, there was a lot of, because everybody was using the same underlying state and there was composability. I feel like a lot of the developer tools, there was some homogeneity around the developer tooling and the different tools that came up in that ecosystem, right? Everything is like already interoperable and composable, and so people sort of like build on top of what other people are building. like the concept of money Legos, because applications are sovereign in the interchain ecosystem, or like on the Cosmos side. A lot of applications will use the same SDK, right? So they use the Cosmos SDK. Chains obviously interoperate using the IBC protocol, and so like that layer of like that those technology pieces are there, and they're really important. But there's still like a lot of core software functions that are missing. And I think those are more on the developer tooling side. And so I think building really robust developer tooling that allows developers to like launch their application specific blockchains is one important place. I'm still like, there's a couple of wallets in the Cosmos ecosystem. I think a lot of them are doing things very well sort of independently, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here, because I know a lot of the people who are building these wallets, but I feel like there is kind of there's a lack of like a very great, like a really, really great experience around using all of the Cosmos applications and the interconnected blockchains. And so that I think is a big opportunity. And I think that the opportunities will continue to become apparent as, Celestia launches, as all of these new layer ones in the Cosmos space are launching. So like Neutron and Say Network and Saga. And so these are kind of sector specific chains. So Saga, is really kind of focused on gaming. Say Network is focused on capital markets and finance. And in each of these little kind of sub ecosystems of the interchain, there will be opportunities to build like better developer tooling, to build better experiences for users to interact with these products and with these platforms. And so there's tons of opportunity here. One of the things I think that people can probably, if anyone's listening that wants to find work in this space, I think that learning about CosmWasm is a huge plus. I think like if you're like a Solidity developer, or if you're coming from say like Solana or some other ecosystem, learning about CosmWasm I think is a huge benefit, and it's certainly something that will help you get access to opportunities in this space. And so CosmWasm is this WASM VM that is compatible with all Cosmos SDK chains and allows you to build smart contracts on Cosmos chains. And CosmWasm is now that the module and is now incorporated in most Cosmos chains, and so a lot of Cosmos chains are now using CosmWasm to build custom functionality rather than building new modules from the Cosmos SDK. I realize this might be a little technical, but essentially there's the Cosmos SDK that has some base modules for building application-specific blockchains, but those modules are really hard to write, and so a lot of teams now are using CosmWasm. Like basically, they're embedding smart contract functionality onto the chains, and they're leveraging that to build custom functionality instead, because it's easier to iterate, better developer tooling. It's written in Rust, etc. And so that I think is a big opportunity for people who are looking for work in the spaces to learn CosmWasm. And actually, just right now, there's a CosmWasm conference and hackathon happening in Berlin called AwesomeWasm. So I'm sure people can look that up, and I think there's probably live streaming. And then at Nebular Summit, we're doing a full day of workshops about a lot of those workshops will be about CosmWasm on the 23rd of July. That's Nebular Hack Day, so people can come there and learn from the experts.
Are you able to maybe name some of the companies that you invested that are hiring right now, and you'd like to send some of the talent their way, both technical and non-technical? So far, everything you mentioned sounds very like developers. I'd like to hear like what are some opportunities for creating more content, or maybe community building, marketing, explaining technical docs, perhaps.
Yeah, I wish I would have looked at all our portfolio companies sort of hiring before this, but I don't have them off the top of my head, but yeah, there's lots of teams. You bound by an NDA. Lots of teams. But I mean, you know what? Like Nebular Summit has a deal with. We have a partnership with CryptoJobsList where you guys have set up a page where our sponsors, and some of those are our portfolio companies, can publish their jobs on CryptoJobsList. And so I think a few of them have already started doing that. So maybe we can share the link to that here in the spaces. Yeah.
Okay. So I think another thing that I was, my Cosmos knowledge is much smaller relative to yours. I think one of the things that I've been always curious about, and I think there's maybe a few podcasts or maybe even a few episodes on that or articles out there, is like, I think one of the big news was like dYdX, which kind of historically been on Ethereum, and then they made this like big announcement that they're moving to Cosmos, and I think that draw a lot of attention to probably both projects. What was that so great about Cosmos, or do you know the main reasons?
Yeah, so they were on Ethereum and then on Starknet, and then they announced that they would migrate to their own Cosmos app chain, and they actually just launched testnet. I think it was like last week or something like 10 days ago. So dYdX is now live on testnet as a Cosmos SDK blockchain. What's interesting about dYdX, and I want to make maybe an analogy later to something that a lot of people would be familiar with, is that dYdX leverages the Cosmos stack. So they use the Cosmos SDK. They're going to be using IBC. I think they're also using CosmWasm. So they fully utilize the stack. They're fully on board with the vision of Cosmos. But they don't market themselves as a Cosmos chain. Like, beyond their initial announcement, I don't really think they talk about Cosmos very much. And certainly their marketing, they're not like branding themselves as a Cosmos chain. And I think that's really cool. And I think it kind of plays at the strengths of the Cosmos stack, is that it's not opinionated about like branding or anything like that. It's just open source software that anybody can use. And Polygon also uses parts of the Cosmos stack. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but they do. And another ecosystem that some people will know and remember is Terra. So Terra, which where USDC where UST was issued and famously collapsed in 2022. Like, they were also a Cosmos chain, but they didn't really market themselves as a Cosmos chain. So I think that's interesting, and I think that more projects will utilize the stack and not necessarily have to align themselves with Cosmos branding, but that's fine. It just creates more opportunities for everybody, and it's creating more use cases for blockchains and for crypto. And I'll give maybe like an analogy here. We're all using, like right now, like you probably have like 10 devices around you that are using the Unix kernel and parts of the Linux stack. None of those devices brand themselves as Linux. So like my MacBook and my iPhone are using the Unix kernel and parts of the Linux stack. Apple doesn't brand themselves like, hey, like we're a Linux company, or our operating system is Linux. No, they use the open source software. They build great products with it because it's a great piece of technology. And that technology has had like a vision about how operating systems should be architectured, how systems should talk to each other, like a security model, and then all of the open source developers that build on it. Like, it's really powerful, and it's really useful to society. And so I see Cosmos as kind of a similar sense, where it's a piece of technology that sure has maybe some like some branding attached to it in the form of Cosmos and Atom, because that was kind of the flagship chain there. But over time, that is going to become less and less relevant, and we'll just be using technologies that don't really associate with like one or another ecosystem. And I'll reference back to a podcast that I heard recently with Hasu, who's like a crypto researcher that a lot of people will know from Twitter. Mm-hmm. And he said something to the effect of, in 5 years from now, it'll be very difficult to know whether you're using Cosmos or Ethereum, because it's not going to matter anymore. The layers of abstraction between the operating system, the underlying technology substrate, and the applications will be so far removed that it's not going to matter anymore. It just won't. So I forgot where we started here, but essentially, yeah, that's kind of how I see this, moving forward.
Yeah, we started with the dYdX moving to
right. That's right. Yeah. So you might start a company tomorrow, and you might be building some embedded device that has an OS on it, and you'll probably choose to use Unix if you're gonna do that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies are doing that, but none of them are saying like we're Linux companies. They're just building companies and products. They just happen to be using open source software that's mature, that well designed, that has a developer ecosystem, that has all sorts of software built for it and modules and extensions, etc. And so I think that's where I see Cosmos going.
Cool. You mentioned something very interesting just now. I'm pretty sure not a lot of people are aware. I certainly was not aware of that. You mentioned the Polygon uses parts of Cosmos stack. Do you know which parts of it?
I think Polygon's kind of evolved over the years, but I believe they use Tendermint. I mean, I think they forked Tendermint. They don't think they use the Cosmos SDK, or maybe they use parts of it, but they certainly, or at least
they use Tendermint for consensus, right?
For consensus, yeah.
Basically, how did the idea of a conference came about, right? So like you moved on to start a VC and then started a podcast, so where those things came at the same time, and then you decided to do a conference, which is kind of like next level chaos of organization. Conference is like the the most amount of effort and coordination that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, like last year we like ECC was coming around, and it's like there's no Cosmos content, or there's no real Cosmos or Interchain conference happening in Paris around ECC. There's all these other events, and let's do like a side event, and that turned into being like a one day, like a pretty big side event. It was like a one day conference with a bunch of sponsors and everything. There's a community of people that came around that sort of gathered around this idea in Nebular Summit. I just thought, like, this is so great. Like, this is, I had such a great time at this event. I was surrounded by like lots of friends and partners and business associates and just new people that I'd never met, and the vibe was great, and people really loved it and they really enjoyed it. And so it just made sense to do it again this year, only bigger. But yeah, bigger means more problems and more opportunities, but also like more problems and things to deal with. So it's been a learning experience, and also the team is now bigger, so it's now like me and another person. So it's like two people, and we have like a production company that's helping us also with the organization. But so Nebular Summit is the Interchain Builders Conference. We say that because I'm really passionate about like developers and people who are building stuff, and so Nebular Summit is going to be the conference where all builders come together to talk about the cool stuff they're building, to talk about the technologies that people can build with, right? So stuff we've been talking about since the beginning. So it's a technical conference, and we'll also have workshops. So like I said, on the 23rd of July, we have Nebular Hack Day, which kind of kicks off Nebular Summit. It's a full day of workshops. So it's like dYdX and Neutron and OKP4 and Juno and Boric and some other teams are going to be giving workshops through that day. So you come with your laptop, you like launch your terminal in VS Code, and you just learn how to do something for like an hour and a half. So that's free for anybody to attend, and the details are on the website. Website's nebular.builders, sorry. And we'll all the links are in my Twitter bio. And then 24th and 25th is Nebular Summit. That's the conference, and this is where it's basically just like 2 days of technical talks on 3 different stages. We have I think we're going to have like 80 speakers, or like something ridiculous.
That's a lot.
And so, and then the venue is also super cool. So it's happening at this place called Albert School. It's a historical building in the 10th district of Paris that used to be a like ceramics showroom. So there was this like very famous ceramics maker back in the late 19th century that had their like basically their store like in the middle of Paris. And so it's this very beautiful Art Deco building with like lots of ceramic, beautiful ceramic murals, and it's like super cool space and then now it's like a business school. So it's also like a perfect space to do a conference because it's got an auditorium and it has classrooms and it has like all the facilities to do like learning basically. So we're really pleased about the venue, and I think people will really like it as well.
Super exciting. To clarify, like you mentioned, it starts with the hack day. Somehow I thought it was going to be a hackathon. Maybe like explain the difference between a hack day and a hackathon.
It was supposed to be a hackathon. Like when we started planning this, we're like, let's do a hackathon, and then we realized just how much work a hackathon was, and also it costs money, and like it is the bear market. So at some point we thought, okay, like let's maybe not do a hackathon. Let's do something in between where people can come and learn how to build stuff. So basically, it's technical workshops.
Yeah, to be honest, when you just mentioned it right now, I've thought that it's it's actually cooler than, at least from my perspective. It's, I think I grew out of going to hackathons. It's like a lot of effort, like sleepless night, and probably from an organization perspective, it's a lot of effort, and you need to find sponsors, pay out good bounties, and in crypto, I think people expect a lot of money for first, second, third places. But I think a hack day is a great opportunity to learn without any pressure. Is that the intention there?
That's the intention, and the economics of the hackathon was something that I was very naive to, because we started playing. Let's get some sponsors, and but we actually have to give prizes to people. There's also the fact that there's this other hackathon happening in Paris at the same time, and so it didn't make sense. But actually, what's really cool is a lot of people have signed up for the hack day because it's free. It's the Sunday also, so a lot of people are still in town after ECC, and they maybe have like nothing to do on Sunday. So I think it's like one of the only events happening on Sunday. But I think it'll be cool. And I used to do these too when I was, maybe like 10, 15 years ago. I'd see these meetups, and it's like, come learn how to build node applications. And some company was holding like a workshop all day long and I really enjoyed them, because you have like mentors and you have people over there who are kind of teaching you how to, and hand holding through the process of building an application. And there's no pressure, right? There's no like pressure to like, I need to like deliver this hackathon project and then present it and everything. And
how technical do you need to be?
So it also lowers I think you need to be fairly technical, right? Because you need to know how to code. But I think that's the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is, even if you're not like mega technical, you can still come to the thing, listen to the presenter, maybe follow along, maybe ask questions. Like, you don't have to be doing the workshop. You can also sit through the workshop, and we want people obviously to come with their laptops and like hack away, but it's open to anyone. So anybody who wants to learn or expand their knowledge should definitely
come. Long as there are seats left, I suppose. Is there like a limit of how many people you expect?
Oh yeah, there's seats left. There's still spots left for both Nebular Summit and for the hack day.
Yeah, super exciting. So we have about 20 minutes left. I know you have a super structured day and you have a conference to organize among 1,000 other things. So yeah, let's do another 10 minutes and then maybe 10 last minutes for Q&A. Hopefully we'll have some good questions. I think one of the interesting things that I wanted to wrap up is like some advice to our listeners and viewers about getting their career, their job started in the industry, and opportunities maybe just generally in crypto, Web3, as well as in the Cosmos specifically. What would you, if you were to start it all again, what would you do?
If I had to start again, and
if you were to start like in 2023, what would you focus on?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it depends on what you're into, Really,
I mean, I know you can code a little bit, right? But I don't think you classify yourself as like a complete.
Yeah. So if I had to start today, what would I focus on?
Start a podcast.
I mean, I would probably start a podcast, right? No, I think I would start a podcast. I'd probably start another podcast. Probably do it differently, though. I mean, you kind of build habits after you do something for 10 years. So it's very difficult for me to like step away from the way I've been doing things for the last 10 years. And when people listen to the Interop, that probably shines through. It's very difficult for me to stay consistent with writing. I've always said like, I want to do a newsletter, like I want to write, and I find that to be the thing that I've wanted to start lots of times and have never really stuck to it. But if someone's into writing, like starting a newsletter is a great way to learn and also make money, if you can build an audience. So on the content side, there's also like obviously lots of opportunities for developers. So, I think that would probably be the second thing that I would do is I really like, if I'd start again, I'd really get into I'd spend more time coding. Like I did a lot of coding in my early career when I was working in Web 2. And when I came into crypto, I kind of stopped coding. I regret it to some extent because I like it. And it's just like, it's kind of like a cold start problem. So now like every time I start coding again, it takes me like forever to get things going, you get my environment set up. And so I think coding is something that I would really spend more time doing. Remember that one time in Singapore where we were sitting around and where you were sitting in my hostel with some other dude and you guys were trying to like find bugs in some smart contract, and I think that's probably the only time ever that I've coded Solidity. I find that's a little bit embarrassing. But
I'm not sure if you know that smart contract got delisted a few months after.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was, but I remember it was.
I think there was a blog post somewhere.
It ended up being pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, I think there was a blog post somewhere.
Yeah.
It was me and Wadzia from I think he's now with also some VC fund. Before that with Consensus. Anyway, cool. I think you took a minute about the content and coding, with technical, non-technical. I think everyone thinks that grass is always greener on the other side, and like non-technical people are like, oh, I want to code, and then like non-tech people were like, oh, I want to have an audience, and then people who have newsletters like, oh, I wish I had a YouTube, and everyone's just like, grass is greener. But you mentioned, I think, playing to your own interests and doubling down on what people are interested in. I think it's like the best approach.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to like.
That's a really like apt point, because I've throughout my entire life I've always like loved tinkering with computers and coding and doing all this like kind of geeky, really technical stuff. And then I went to school and I studied like marketing and e-commerce. And I came out of school and I got a job at some agency that was starting to get into web, and I wanted like a project manager position. I was like, I want to like be basically the project manager for this agency, and I'm going to oversee like developers and stuff like that. And they're like, well, probably in the first year or two, as we're building out the team, you're also going to be building the projects and you're going to be coding. And I don't know, like I saw it as such a, I was like, oh, this is like a step down. Like I don't want to be in this position. Like I want to be in a kind of like project manager leader position. And looking back on that, I thought like it was such a stupid, stupid mindset that I had at that time, that I was somehow like above, developing and building the things myself. Like it's just absolutely mind-boggling that I could have been so stupid in my mid-20s. Now I really look up to people who are who are technical and developers, and I love being around them, and I love asking questions of how things work. And this is really the Interop, like this is what I try to do. But I do feel like it's on me, but it's unfortunate that I haven't kept my technical skills to a high enough level that I can actually, where I can actually kind of build stuff. I mean, I could if I really got into it and spent a lot of time doing it. But it is something that I regret a lot about the trajectory of the last 10 years.
Interesting. Yes, I guess the takeaway here for everyone who considered coding is just code. But for those who want to start a podcast, tell us, what would you have done differently?
I think one thing that I learned in the last year and a half starting the Interop, like this other podcast that I do, is to not be so concerned about things being super clean and nice and everything be perfect. And which, with Epicenter, I spent a lot of time with the team there, building, the process for editing the podcast, and everything's got to be spotless, and the audio has to be amazing, and the content and all this stuff. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time away from actually just producing content and thinking up cool ideas and exploring different topics. And so when I started the Interop, I was like, okay, this is going to be a YouTube channel. I'm going to do live streams. I'm going to hit record, and I'm going to end the recording, and that's it. That's the podcast. There's no editing. There's no like special audio version that's been like edited by an audio editor. Like I started that way, and after 2 episodes, like no, I'm not going to do this. This is like too much work and too much involvement. So yeah, producing content now is super easy. There's so many tools, and also it's just like it's gotten a lot better. Like just thinking back 10 years ago, how we used to record the podcast, like we struggled. Like, I mean, there were no tools. Like right. Riverside didn't exist, and StreamYard and Descript and all these like amazing tools that we use now. It was a lot easier and a lot harder and a lot more expensive to produce content. And so, yeah, just get out there, hit record, write, hit publish, and I think Another piece of advice I give to people who are producing content, and this is something I also learned, is, don't be concerned about whether or not you make mistakes, or maybe people shouldn't be concerned about not knowing things. And for the several years into Epicenter, when I prepare for a podcast, I would spend hours and hours and hours preparing a podcast so that my knowledge about the topic was going in like super high, right? Or I had like a high level of knowledge and understanding of the topic that I was covering, so that I could look smart in front of the audience and the person that I had in front of me. But that's the whole point of like I realized that the point of doing the podcast is that I can ask questions and I can learn from the person. And so leveraging your podcast or your media to just be a place where you can actually do the learning is immensely valuable. And if you can just let go, like once I let go of this kind of idea that I had to know everything, it becomes so much fun and so much more. It becomes more natural, and now I feel perfectly fine asking a question that 5-6 years ago I thought I wouldn't have asked, because I would have felt like people thought I was stupid because I didn't know the answer to that question, you know. So just going in and you know, who does this really well? Like, you know, I think like Peter McCormick. I don't necessarily like agree with all his views, but you know, I think he's the quintessential just normie, right? That just like, and who just came in, didn't know anything about anything, and was just asking questions. And I think a lot of the podcasts that came up in the last like 5-6 years around crypto were just people who came in not knowing. Like CryptoCito is another great example. He's like a YouTuber in the Cosmos space. You know, he came in like he knew a little bit about crypto, and he's just super humble about like, okay, like I'm gonna come on this I'm gonna talk to this person. I'm gonna ask them questions. I might not know the answers, but that's why I'm talking to them, is because I want to understand this stuff, and that's how I'm going to build my knowledge. So I think that's the right way to go about it.
Resonating with it, I think we're making some of the mistakes that you mentioned, over a little bit of overproducing, and still we're trying to be perfectionist about it, which definitely I'm feeling.
But yeah, because it's fun.
Yeah,
it's fun to overproduce. It's fun to like, you know, do this content and then like produce it, and then you spend tons of hours ironing, you know, like tinkering with it and making it perfect, and your intro and your jingle and your, you know, whatever, and then you put it out there, and it's like, oh wow, this looks amazing. And then
like two listens.
But to the person who's
no one listens to it.
Yeah, and I know you're a perfectionist too, so that's why that's why I'm telling you this. You know, it's so easy to just produce the content, and it, you know, at some point I think, you know, with the Interop, when there's a little bit more budget, and then I might get like an audio editor to help me with some stuff and produce it like a proper audio version. But like, it doesn't need to start that way. And now there's just, the tools are so good that it really, that you know, that small increase in quality that you're going to get doesn't really justify the cost. I think the content's really what's most important. I
guess unless you're Mr. Beast. Unless you're at that scale, I think they perfect every single frame on their videos. But I guess there is some threshold where that makes sense.
That's his, yeah.
I think in the beginning it doesn't, I don't know. You know definitely more than I do on this. Let me read some questions that have been asked under the thread. One question from Shivam. Not a lot of people think about event management as a career in Web3. Thoughts about the future of event management?
So event management is the thing that I like to do, but I would like to spend less time doing. So hopefully like next year we'll have a bigger team that's kind of managing a lot of that stuff, because it is hard, right? It can get really time consuming to organize an event. But again, I think focusing on the content is the most important part. So once you have the content really figured out, and you're going to keep people engaged and get people interested in the content, I think that's the most important part. And then you can kind of build around that. And I think like this year we really focused a lot on content and making sure that it's going to be really interesting for people. And so like one of the things is that we're not doing a whole lot of panels at Nebular Summit. Like last year we had tons of panels, and because we wanted to get a lot of people on stage. But this year we're only doing like 4 panels over the 2 days, and they're very specific topics. And the reason why we're doing that is because I think that most panels are shit. I mean, unless panels are prepared, and unless the moderator spends like an hour with the panelists beforehand, preparing the questions, preparing the topics, you know, a lot of panels are just like, you know, 4 guys or girls coming on stage with a moderator. They haven't prepared anything. Maybe they've received some questions beforehand, but they haven't really discussed about where they want to go. You have to make a panel engaging. And so anyway, so we're limiting the amount of panels, but we're going to have debates, which I think is like an interesting format that people will appreciate, and that always get maybe a little bit spicy.
How would debates look like? I've never been at a conference debate session.
Well, we're still figuring out what that's going to look like, but basically we'll have 2 people with opposing views, or some opposing values, and someone who's there to kind of moderate, like ask questions and and
Spicy.
moderate. But the key is that we have two people who are like in opposition to some extent. Yeah.
Will you have someone from European Union with central bank?
No, so we'll do like a EVM versus CosmWasm debate. We'll also do, this gets a little bit into the weeds here, but we'll do like app chains versus roll-ups debate, and we might do like another one as well.
Fixed supply versus infinite printer, maybe. I like how you just nodded and
That's a good one.
didn't say anything. Cool. Okay, but I think like we digress a little bit from the question, but I think there's, I don't know, the question was about career in event management, specifically in crypto. I think there are so many conferences happening, including online hackathons. I wonder if eventually we'll see some people just specializing on organizing, hosting, and like maybe consulting on events for crypto. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think so. This actually might be something that, well, something I'd like to see more of. Is there's a lot of event agencies out there. You know, agencies that, you know, organize events, but I think there aren't many that are specific to crypto. You know, that understand the culture and understand the tech and the norms and yeah, I think that's something that I'd like to see more. I mean, there's a few, right? But they're just so busy because they're few and far between. And so, like, we work with an agency, for example, and they're great. They're like really on top of it. Like, you know, they're an event production agency, but they don't get crypto. So we have to like explain to them, you know, oh, like we're gonna do this signage, and there's like some liquidity pun, and they're like, what is this joke that you were trying to do, right? Or like stuff like that. So yeah, crypto agencies or event agencies that are crypto specialized, I think a good.
Jordan Scott, how can I learn how to code in Web3? What are the bases I should learn? Maybe what are the best resources that I should learn from?
I think I think it depends on which ecosystem you're you know, or which language you want to learn. I mean, certainly there's like tons of resources for learning Solidity. If you want to learn how to code for CosmWasm, there's CosmWasm Academy, I think it's called. That's one resource. Yeah, CosmWasm Academy. That's one resource, and I wish I had more.
That's a good start. Are you aware of any like YouTubers who specifically specialize on technical tutorials for Cosmos?
I'm not. I don't think there are.
I think that's a great opportunity. I think in
that are specifically CosmWasm.
It could be a great land grab for those who want to specialize in that and create like technical content. I think in the Solidity space there are a lot of these big influencers.
Yeah.
And they're getting bigger and bigger. We interviewed some of them, which was pretty good. Patrick Collins, I think, is probably one of the most known ones. There is DAP University, Eat the Blocks, Julian from Eat the Blocks, a lot of different great guys. And I think that new content creators that are technical for Solidity, contract audits coming out all the time. I think it's a great opportunity for Cosmos ecosystem as well. If you're coding and you want to create content.
And there's you know, there's more and more hackathons now. So like right now I mentioned there's the CosmWasm hackathon going on. There's going to be a hackathon also at Cosmoverse. So we didn't mention events, but there's kind of like 3 main Cosmos events now. So there's Cosmoverse, which is this big, like it's going to be probably the biggest Cosmos conference this year. I mean, it will be the biggest Cosmos conference this year, and it's happening in Turkey. It's organized by this CryptoCito guy, this YouTuber who creates like a lot of content around Cosmos and Cosmos chains, but although not like super technical, but if people want to like an intro to the space, that's a good starting point, a good resource. And they'll have a hackathon for sure. And then there's the Gateway to Cosmos conference. They're organized by like a VC fund in Prague. They had their second edition this year. They also had a hackathon. And then there's Nebular Summit. It's a great place to learn also. And then there's some ecosystem conferences. So a lot of the chains now do their own conference. So like Evmos does their own conference. You know, Osmosis is doing their own conference also now. OsmoCon, they're doing theirs in Paris next week. The Polymer team does IBC Summit. They're doing a bunch of those around the world. And a lot of times, like, I think there's going to be, you know, increasingly those will have hackathons attached to them. So that's a good place to learn as well.
I mean, one last question. This one is from me. I just thought of something. I think in Ethereum ecosystem, there's like a lot of talk right now about smart contract security. I think there are audit firms popping up every day, and it's a really, really hot space.
Yeah.
Do you know any stats about the number of hacks in Cosmos ecosystem? Is smart contract vulnerability still a thing in Cosmos? Are there opportunity for for white hat or black hat hackers to get some part of the pie?
Sure, absolutely. There's, just as in Ethereum, things in Cosmos get audited. There are less hacks, I think, by virtue of the fact that the Cosmos SDK, which is the primary way that people build blockchains in Cosmos, that thing provides a stable framework for building applications, and that thing's been audited. And so by using the Cosmos SDK, you're kind of protecting yourself against a lot of the lower level vulnerabilities. And also just the fact that Solidity is great, but there are a lot of inherent vulnerabilities in Solidity, like reentrancy attacks and things like that just don't exist when you're using something like the Cosmos SDK, and certainly CosmWasm as well. There's a lot of built-in security features there inside that language that protects applications from a lot of the main vulnerabilities that Solidity developers have to build around. You have to build your application in a certain way to avoid those sort of vulnerabilities. Well, in CosmWasm, they don't really exist from just the way this is constructed. But yeah, there's always opportunities for people to audit and more security in the space.
Cool. Another question from Shivam. Since you interact with many Web3 founders and leaders, what are the few key features or behaviors that you've seen consistently across successful founders?
Focus is a huge one, and focus there's different layers to focus. I think there's focus, just being able to focus on the task at hand, right? So that's kind of the lower level thing, day to day, to be focused and structured. But then there's focus on the problem that you're solving. So one of the things that we look for when we talk to teams is, are these founders really focused on this problem, or are they just chasing some industry trend? When this particular trend is over, are they going to just pivot to another trend? And so we look for founders that have identified a problem that they really want to solve, and they're super focused on solving, and that they're going to try to solve this problem no matter what happens, no matter what the market trends are, whatever, no matter where they, for a bear market or a bull market, whether or not they have investors, whether or not they have traction. That's the main thing that we look for in founders. I think one thing that is also really, really valuable in a founder is someone a technical founder, but who also has business development skills. So, a lot of times we'll find this dynamic with the CEO, CTO, where you have a CEO who's maybe more outgoing, who's going to be doing the business development and the outreach and everything, and a CTO that's probably a little bit less so and more focused on the tech. I find founders that I find really captivating are those who can handle both, who can one example here is Ismail from Lagrange. He can talk about zero knowledge, and I'm totally lost. I don't know what he's talking about. He really understands the technology super well, but he's also a great speaker, and he really carries a message, and he's super outgoing and just a good business person as well. So I think founders like this are really, really underrated.
Okay. Good points, especially about focus. Do we have any more minutes, or shall we wrap it up? Do you have to run?
Maybe one more question.
Okay.
One more question.
Okay, this question is from me, though. Something that I thought while you were giving an answer. What do you think, though? So, you mentioned that focusing on specific problem and fixing that problem is super important, at least to you. Let me just maybe a devil's advocate a little bit. What do you think of when team jumps on a certain trend as a way to get their foot into the door, just get their, get the maximum number of followers, or just get their some adoption, and then after that kind of trying to create that momentum into a mission versus just focusing on the problem that they started from day one? Do you understand that question? Should I paraphrase it?
There's vision, right? And then there's the mission. You might have a vision, and that vision doesn't really change. That vision it's a 50,000 foot vision that it sets the course for what you're going to do, and then your day to day or year to year mission might change because that target sometimes can also move, right? So when I'm talking about focus, I mean like the long-term vision should be solid, and you should focus on that. And then your plans might change over time to achieve it, and you might change your focus slightly, but you're still heading towards that vision.
Have you seen any successes where that came from like companies or teams chasing trends, and then they backset stumble upon something, and then they kind of like took off?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible to follow some trend and then realize that there's a great product idea, and certainly there's lots of examples of this. But because we're so early in the space, and the crypto space is super early, and there are a lot of opportunities to really create narratives and to create these really important visions that are going to lead us towards like a more decentralized web. And so I think this early in the industry's life cycle, we can count on founders that are going to create the vision and the narrative that leads us, to the next 10, 15 years of growth in this space. And I think those who are really focused on those ideas are the ones that are, the most inspiring.
Solid. Okay. I think that's the good inspiration for us all to focus on a big picture. And I think one thing that I just mentioned is that we're still super early. I think it's a good reminder. I think it's feels especially so during the bear market. Anyway, it's quite interesting that he's still seeing that after like 10 years in the space.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always really been, since I've gotten to crypto, I've been interested in the vision, right? The Web3 vision, like how we execute the vision, I think has changed over the years. I mean, certainly it's changed over the years, but the overall goal is still the same. It's about creating a web that is more decentralized, where there's more sovereignty, and a web that's more open. And I think that has not really changed over the last 13 years since Bitcoin was
100%. I think we're still definitely far away from it. Anyway, I know you have to be running in just a few minutes. I think we're over time as well. Closing thoughts, Seb? Thank you so much.
Thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. I really like this. It's great content, and also congratulations on CryptoJobsList and being like such an important resource for people to find work, which is really great, but also understand the space better and like how they should be positioning themselves as professionals in the space. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Seb. You've definitely been an inspiration to me over these years and support. Thanks so much for staying all the way till the end. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and make sure to ask your questions in the comments down below so we can go through them and answer them as much as we can. Remember that asking good questions is the best part of learning and super important. So make sure to also subscribe and like the video for more videos. We are trying to do these every 2 weeks or so, and these are also live streamed on Twitter. So this is how you can participate live and ask our guests questions. Make sure to follow us on CryptoJobsList on Twitter and on YouTube as well, as I just said. All right. Thank you so much. See you guys again.